All right, we're live.
All right. Do I do self-intro too, or?
Yeah, please.
All right, cool. Alan Blount's been a developer for a really long time. I spent a lot of the time working from home, kind of isolated, which goes back to Alex's point about it's good to have a community around. Uh-oh. I'm looking. Good. Yeah, very happy to come out and hang out with this and a couple of other meetups in town when I don't have the kids and can make it. Been a Node developer for a few years now. Pretty quickly jumped onto the Meteor framework as opposed to Ember. We have not yet come to fisticuffs, but we discuss relative merits periodically. Interesting developments have happened in the Meteor world recently, and they're sort of trying to break out of their walled garden and support the NPM community more broadly. They're also switching from their own internal UI rendering system, client-side rendering system, which was based on handlebars, and trying to support Angular as well as React as first-class citizens for rendering the UI. To that point, a lot of the Meteor community has branched out to React, or rather was driving that change, and now Meteor has finally come along. Anyway, one of the main guys who's contributed a whole bunch of stuff to the Meteor community has contributed a couple of really compelling projects for React. I gave you the backstory about how I brought to it and sort of the background of the developers behind it. But these projects have nothing to do with Meteor, and in fact can and should be used agnostics of it. I'm going to real quickly give an overview, and then we'll build something together real quick. We'll start with sort of the outside in. react-cdk, component development kit. There's 400 million different boilerplates to get either a small component started, a little component that you would use inside of a big application, or boilerplate for a big application, because there's 200 million different libraries that you could possibly use. So you never know where to start. This is another one of those. But it's more than just a basic boilerplate to get you started. It comes with a bunch of other tool sets as well as some good defaults. The part and piece of this that I found the most compelling was that it automatically included the React Storybook. Well, what's React Storybook? This is basically a way to test all of your UI states. So a React component is entirely dependent on its internal state and props. And those can be represented by one or two just JavaScript objects, just a bunch of keys and values. And you switch those keys and values around, and it can change everything about your widget on the screen. You don't have to go through any weird life cycles. You don't have to understand scope or any of that shit. It can just real quickly re-render your UI element based on whatever you hand it. So this is one of the tools, and the best one that I found for just playing with those different UI elements in a super easy to go way. There's some other really cool benefits of it, and we'll go over that in a second when we look at the actual live code. That Storybook can be published out to GitHub pages for your component, and therefore, while you're playing with it and developing it, you can really quickly come up with a working code example walking through all the different states of your element right up on the screen, which is, I think, pretty compelling. There's a couple of other cool things. I use ESLint already. This comes with Airbnb style guide, which is totally reasonable set of defaults. Comes with Enzyme for running Localcast, which is great. All the Babel stuff that you need to transpile from ES6 down. And then it's got some tools to sort of keep any of your dependencies updated, which is a little crazy, but there you go. So yeah, it's actually super simple to get started with. So you have to have Yeoman and this framework. I actually already have this locally, so I don't need to install it. This is a global install flag, and this just says, hey, go get me those packages. But anybody following along could easily do that. And then you use this templating system to basically create your whole project. Oop, I totally messed up. Look at that. That created everything in that React wizard thing. That's not at all what I wanted to do, is it? I know we can do the rm-rf React React wizard. There There we go. Destroy everything that I just did. And now we can do React Confirm button. Hey, look at that. So it's telling me that I can upgrade my stuff. Yes, I'll override. Yeah, I don't know if I want to override the README, but we'll get there. All right, great. And then we can do an npm install in case anything's changed. And again, it's a boilerplate, so it started things out for me. If you saw before, I had a .getignore file and a README file. Now I have, a license and a contributing, some other sort of basic conventions. It gave me a package.json with a bunch of junk in it, which we're now retrieving, and then an SRC folder. Again, good common conventions, good basics about how to share repositories. What it will do under the hood when I actually publish this, we'll create a dist folder in here, and everything that gets bundled down for actual distribution will get put in there, and I can ignore that from the repository. I guess we can keep going through this while we're waiting on that to install. Once you get all of those dependencies installed, which is what we're doing right now, you can actually start developing a component. And the way to do that by default is this npm run storybook. Like, this is a command that's going to fire up a local WebKit-based, Webpack-based server on localhost 9010. And this, again, is a set of conventions. You can easily change this to whatever you want. I've never in my life started anything on port 9010, so I don't have any conflict with anything that I have running locally. So hopefully we will soon be there.
How many dependencies does it have?
A fair bit. Yeah, let's take a quick look. So
it's not that many.
the list is not that many, but then some of these dependencies might go a little deeper.
Oh, yeah.
I'm surprised that I don't see Storybook on here. Where are you, Storybook? Huh. Let's see it. Oh, this is just the CDK. This is just the CDK dependencies. That's not the actual package dependencies. So if I look at the actual dependencies, we got a whole lot more, right? Now, the runtime dependencies for production, pretty small, right? But all of this right here is stuff to help you with development, which is really what this is all about. This is something to set you up with all the stuff that you need for development. Right. Cool. And then obviously there's the storybook, which we're talking about a lot here. So I should be able to run npm run storybook at this point. And so it's determining whether or not I have a custom Babel RC to change how Babel compiles to ES5. It will check my Webpack config, and I'll show you that in a second, to add jump to Webpack. Then starting it, and it's a hot module reloading, so I should be able to make edits and see them sort of on the fly. So this is its default. It gives me a hello button, right? And I can click the hello button, and it shows me actions down here. Let me make this screen a little bigger. I cannot make the screen a little bigger. There it is. All right. So hello button gives me the actions. I can pass in any sort of actions I want here, and then I can easily toggle between different properties for this button based on the props that are passed in. So that's pretty sweet. But let's take a look and see what happens or what is happening under the hood to make that be the case. So if I come down here to the SRC folder and I take a look in there, I've got an index.js, which is where my code is. I've got a tests folder, which we'll come back to in a second. And I've got this stories folder. And the stories for storybooks live in a folder of stories. That's just a convention, but it's a reasonable one. So here's the React component that it comes up with as a boilerplate. That's just giving you some code that actually runs that you can tweak around and change to whatever you want to do. So this is, again, just the boilerplate that it installed for me. Anytime you start a CDK project, you'll get this too. It's a pretty basic set of React components and setting prop types and exporting the value. If you have played with React at all, this looks really familiar. If you haven't, this looks crazy. But it's actually pretty easy to understand. And one of the nice things about React is it's trying to be as simple, basic JavaScript as it can be. And then everybody switched to ES6, and the basic JavaScript now looks new and different, and you've got to adjust. But once you get used to reading ES6, it's still pretty basic. We can go over the actual component here in a second. But if we look over at the stories, which is the part that I wanted to show you now, this is a way to define what different states you want for your component. And real quickly, we need the React library so it knows how to interpret JSX. Then from the Storybook project, we have this stories of builder or stories of factory, and then an action helper. This action helper is just a way to pass actions out to Storybook for any function that you would have otherwise passed through. And we'll show you that in a second. And then the last import up at the top is the widget that you're trying to test. This is the thing that you want to test in a story. And in this case, it's just the parent index file. It could be anything that you wanted to test and play with. And assuming that you're doing this in a big project, you just go find the UI element that you want to test and bring it in. Ideally, you're testing a kind of small scale element, like a singular element, or even if you're testing a big page, you're kind of testing just that page, and whatever that page pulls in is a child of that page. So in theory, you're really only going to have one thing you're importing here per story file. And then you create a factory of, I want to make a story of whatever I'm making a story of, and this can be anything you want here. We'll change this to confirm button because that's what we know we're going to build eventually. It's kind of nice to have a default view where you're passing very little in, but then you can pass in any sort of props that you want in React. And this is very basic React stuff. You create the element that you want to create. You can pass it any sort of properties that you want in a format that should be familiar to anybody that's doing HTML or whatever. And then children of the element that you're passing in, right? And then you can close that element. So again, that's just JSX syntax, which is React framework stuff outside of the scope of today's talk, but pretty darn basic. We need a confirm state here, right? And so as you make those changes, this thing automatically updates. Our default view will update with our changes. And this becomes our way of developing our component very quickly and easily. So obviously what I should be doing is committing this now, right? Can't have done 15 minutes of work and not committed. Sorry here. There we go. Install react-cdk. All right. Now, you don't necessarily want to watch me write this component out. I can certainly do it, and I will do it maybe after the main presentation or whatever. Basically, the idea here is I just wanted to make a very simple component that had a, you clicked on it, and then it said, hey, are you sure you actually want to click on this? And go from there. But you don't need to watch me write that right now. What I think that we should do is talk about some of the other things that you can do within the CDK and with Storybook. So if I take a look at my package.json file up here in the scripts section, again, this is the stuff that came with Storybook. And this is, you can't see that, a useful set of tools. I mean, the pre-published script we'll go over in a second, but that's sort of the magic of making sure all the things transpile correctly so that you can then publish your widget out to NPM and not have to worry about dependencies and junk, right? That's the get everything ready to actually publish. But these are the other commands that are sort of custom within Storybook. Preset for running ESLint on your source. Preset for running ESLint with a fixed flag on your source to try and clean up your coding conventions. Presets for running tests. Again, some of that's core npm command overriding, and some of that's sort of like this extra command. Here's that npm run storybook command, and this is what's going on under the hood if you wanted to run it manually. But then there's this publish storybook command, which is what I want to show now. So if I come over here to my command line, we go npm run publish storybook. So what this should do is take everything that I'm seeing right now in my browser on my Storybook, which is right here, and take that and make a GitHub Pages version of that I can then link people to. So there we go. It finished. I was able to read what my GitHub repo was automatically. I didn't have to do any sort of configuration for that. And if I now go to that URL, I have my exact same customized Storybook available to play with my widget. Now, this publish Storybook is like a one-time command. It's not going to automatically update this as I'm developing. But as I get ready to release something or whatever, I remember to run this command, and then poof, my repository has documentation. It has a demo. It has an example. And I just come out here to my repository here, and I edit it, and I say website is that. Bam. I now have a fancy website to demo my UI widget. Again, this is all only on the UI side. This is really just packaging and tooling around React. None of this changes your component or how your component would work, but it is tools to make the development of said component much, much easier. There are other aspects of what the CDK does to try and keep your dependencies updated. Let's see. And that will sort of, as other projects update, this will sort of update your project to pull those other released dependencies updated. But I really haven't played with that much yet. The truth is, at this point, I'm just going to develop out the rest of the component. If anybody doesn't have questions about this, we can sort of go into this confirm button. It really should be a pretty quick one. Anybody have anything that they want to ask about before we just do core React stuff? No? No? Okay. One thing that I will bring up before I do this is that the output of this project right here is an NPM package, right? That you can then publish out to the world. And then within your own project, you can import or use that NPM package, and then you have your components or any exports available, right? That's great. I have run into difficulties linking them directly within my own internal development. Like, so if I have a package that I want to develop locally that I don't want to publish out to the world, currently I'm having to run pack to link them in correctly. I can link to the folder and then tell the builder to try and use the folder, but that hasn't been working for me in my current build environment. So that's actually something that if anybody has recommendations for me, I might discuss with you about how to run an NPM bundled project outside of the scope of my application and have it build in internally. NPM link's supposed to work.
I was gonna say, what's the issue that you're running into?
When I do the NPM link and it runs the build, during that process, if I'm running local development, it works fine. If I'm running a compile for production, it's saying can't find dist index. You need to install npm install dist. I think it's just something
Specifically when you're working with React?
No, it's before React.
Well, I think I have had like tons of problems with npm link, and I just use LNS, and it's like, you know.
But see, the problem is what I'm authoring is source files that need to get compiled for npm. I'm not authoring the actual export of npm. So a direct ln wouldn't work. I'd have to ln to a build result.
Right. Okay,
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay, well, no, that's cool. Let's just real quickly, we'll take some of this stuff out here. Oh, I guess we'll leave that because that's not too distracting. But let's just take a quick look here. If you're not familiar with what ES6 syntax is, this is a little bit too much black magic, right? So let's take a quick look and see what we're doing here. So this is a params variable that I'm assigning into a function that I'm creating, right? So if I were to write this in old JavaScript syntax, it might be var button equals function with these params, and I want it to return, and then there's kind of no way around. In the world of React, the syntax is like this, right? And that's not really writing HTML. It looks like you're writing HTML, but in fact, you're writing something that gets compiled by React into JavaScript to write the function that renders to the browser. So while this looks like I'm writing HTML, it's really just, that's a convenient syntax for you to understand. So this is all just ES6, a new syntax for JavaScript. Sorry, this is all ES6, a new syntax for JavaScript that roughly is equivalent to this, right? So don't get too distracted by that. It's just another way of writing a function. So what that's saying is I'm creating a function called confirm button, all right? And that confirm button takes a single set of parameters as its input. And this syntax is saying from that input of parameters, I want to extract the children, the on-click, and the style, right, as possible variables from that. Instead of doing it that way, I'm going to stick to this, and I'm going to make this a function. You know, I think, honestly, I hate writing these as functions. I kind of prefer to write them as classes. Anybody else have a set of, you prefer the functions to the classes?
Damn it.
You're the only person who likes classes.
I think for me the main thing that's like really annoying about the functions is when you like try to make it like a single statement in parentheses, and then suddenly you need to do a console.log, and then you have to rewrite your function.
Yeah, I'm okay with making it as a curly, but if I don't do the class, how do I set state? Where in the life cycle do I do that when I'm not doing a constructor on the class?
In your Redux state.
Yeah, I should do it in Redux, but this is a small standalone component. No?
You have to write a higher order component that knows how to set state.
All right.
The judgment begins.
Yeah, there we go. All right. And React component. All right. This is again one of those things where where Eric's going to mock us, and that will cause us to get better at some point, right? Is that the strategy? Is that what you said? I think that's the strategy. Super props, and then this state. And then let's say push this false, right? And then we can render, and then we can return, and what is this? Props. And there's our same old button. No. That, and that, and then that. All right, and then confirm button. All right. That should be, assuming that I didn't break it too bad, the equivalent. Why are you?
Do you need
You
a
didn't
let?
put a const in front of
There
that.
we go. Thank you. Aha! All right, so we took that function that was just a basic function and rewrote it as a class. Again, this is all sort of ES6 syntactical magic of stuff that you could write as ES5. Because that's the only way I know to instantiate it in component state in a reliable fashion. I'm ready for mockery. Bring it. No? All right, I'm carrying on.
Silent judgment.
All right, the silent judgment, right. So again, I know that it still works because I had that thing here. And if you notice, when I broke it, it gives you a big, nasty error up in your screen, which if your editor is transparent like mine, you at least get to see. So we know we're rendering a button. We'll deal with the on-click here in a second. I think that what I want to do is create a on confirm handler here. And if I click on confirm, I want to set my state to clicked is equal to true. And actually that's when I would be confirmed, right? So this would be the user is going to pass in an on-click function, right? User passes in function to be triggered after confirmed. All right, and so I don't want that to actually be passed through here. I want that to be when it's actually confirmed. So on confirm init, on confirm click. On confirm init, I'm setting this flag to true. On confirm click, I'm going to set it to false, and actually trigger the on click function, right? Do it. No, we should probably do it the right way. Do this on click is equal to props on click find this. So that's the right way. Now I can trigger this on click, probably with a call or something. All right. Now this I will now do on confirm init, and just to see whether or not we wired that in appropriately, I clear my action logger. That no longer passes through that action. That's great, but it doesn't necessarily give me what I was hoping for. First of all, clear all that. Cannot read property set state of null. That's exciting. All right, so these things have
It's
to be
your
bound.
on-click handler. Right.
So this one right here needs to be bound to this, right?
Yep.
But you don't want to bind in line, so you got to do it up here. So I'll change this to handle on confirm init. This handle confirm init find this.
So you're passing an on-click function into as a prop into the component, but then that component finds the on-click handler to itself.
I got a plan.
All right.
but yes, I agree. It's awkward. Let's see if my plan comes up with anything. We're at least not getting a big gnarly error right now, which is good. All right. So if you are developing within React and you don't have the React developer tools, you should really get them because they're convenient to poke under the hood and see what's happening. So within my widget, I'm passing in these props. The children is just the text string that's written inside my component, right? And then this onClick function is this action function right here, button clicked, right? It also tells me my state. But after I click it when I'm in the confirmed state, I'm not doing anything different. So this handle confirm init is not actually what I want to do. I'm going to change this to, actually we're going to globally rewrite init to clicked. All right, and then within this, we're going to say if this state clicked, and then otherwise, we're going to set the state to clicked. Okay, so now we are in the state clicked. We are going to do those things, wrap it all into a function. That makes sense. All right, so now if we do it, aha! All right, we're making progress here. Let's. We're never actually clearing the state to none because I'm an idiot and didn't return my function fast. All right, there we go. Now, if we select our widget and we're watching it, and we have our state of clicked is true, we click it, the state goes false. So just so we can follow along at home here, I'm going to reduce the font size a bit because that was crazy. All right, and oh, that's not going to be right. All right, so here we are at an initial state. State is clicked is false, and I now click it. Boom, it sets the state to clicked, but nothing comes up in our logger. We did not trigger the onClick function. Now I click it again. It sets our state to clicked false, and it now triggers the action logger. So we're part of the way there, but our UI doesn't help us out at all. It doesn't tell us anything about what the state is. So we can do clicked. I'll probably change that term because that really isn't very obvious anymore, is it? State, right? I can take the clicked property out of, that's wrong term. Take the clicked variable out of the state and just set it as a normal variable so it's easier to use. And we can go about this a couple of different ways. We can re-render an entire new button with a different setup when we are doing this, or we can just sort of change out the children of what's going on inside the bucket and change out the style based on what's going on. I think that the latter is a little bit simpler for me to understand, so that's how I'm going to go about it. I am going to change this to, let's see, npm install save class names. That's right. And then in my component, I'm going to import class names from class names, which is obvious. And then I can use class name, which is the normal property, but instead of passing it a string, I can pass it class names, which is a function that can take lots of craziness, including, I can pass it a string. I want to say this is a confirm button, just so it always has that string. I can also say I want it to have confirm button confirming when clicked is equal to true or truthy. And then let's define a couple of other props that people might pass in. We could pass in style confirm. We could pass in class name, which would be a string. And pass in class name confirm as a string. We really just kind of want to support different ways that people might use to configure their component. So we would change this to class name confirm if it's clicked as well. And those are all different ways of passing in those different class names. We are now starting to have more than I can easily fit on one line, so we'll break all that out. Confirm class name and class name confirm. Okay. And so then for the style here, probably do something more fancy than this, but we can do a simple ternary operator. And if it's clicked, we're going to do style. Otherwise, we'll do style confirm. All right. Let's see what broke. Nothing broke. That's crazy. All right. So another thing that we were talking about is the different text that we might display, and I think that makes a lot of sense. We could support instead of passing in children, we could pass in text as props, right? So how would we do that? Pretty simple. We just do text here and text. Of course, these are backwards. And I guess click still makes sense as our state. So in this case, I really want to change our default story here. I like passing in that thing and that on-click handler. It's nice to see the action come through. I'm going to say text is do stuff, and my text confirm is are you sure? And for now, that's all I'm going to do. And I'll delete the children here, and I'll try it out. Oh, text is not defined because I didn't extract it from the properties right here. All right, do stuff. Are you sure? Do it. Do stuff. Are you sure? Do it. That's not bad. All right. Anybody want to check in where we're at right now? Does this make sense what we're doing so far? I'm basically kind of done now. At least with the first draft of this. We could support children here, right? So we can say, there we go. We can say with children always displays. Right, and so again, this is a way for us to play with the components here. Here is child text.
You're gonna need to escape that grid, maybe.
What did I do? Alright, view, back to custom styles. Alright, that changed my stories, and now that broke. Aha! So this is
You gotta
crashing
escape.
out because on click is now lowercase. I did something really awesome. when I
You
was-
did a parentheses there that's like, is that what you meant to do?
What are you talking about?
Always add with children always displays.
I mean, that's just in the text of my description.
Oh, never mind. I got confused.
Yeah, we're good. All right. Aha. All right, great. And so that always displays text is always there, and just the rest of the button toggles, right? But I don't like the fact that it has this passive non-breaking space. That's kind of annoying. But anyway, you can see that as you're playing with your UI stuff, I don't know if your applications are super, super fast to compile, but mine take a few seconds. So if I'm working on a standalone widget and I gotta have an idea about what that widget's going to be, I can play with just that one widget and pass in any sort of state I can think of that my application in the real world will pass to it. But I can do it in isolation really, really fast. And if it has its own internal state, it does its thing. If you need other tools, we were talking about how to configure Webpack. So that is where am I? I'm in the source. Storybook, yeah. In the .storybook folder, when you do a component development kit thing, or if you just install Storybook in your own package or application, it has a config. It also has a Webpack config. The config itself is really just a loader of stories. I've talked to the developer to see whether or not you can, like I personally would like to have a storybook with chapters, so to speak, a storybook of other storybooks, because it can get really long for your full application if you're injecting a whole bunch of stories. So far, there's not a strategy around that. So you really just have different storybook routes or something like that, or just keep all of your components modularized and look at them that way. And then the config for Webpack, if you've used Webpack, makes a lot of sense. If you haven't used Webpack, then you kind of have to fight it to get what you need in place. It's not too bad. I've been able to get, Bootstrap and some other things that I've used installed and working pretty easily. But it is its own thing that you have to learn. And as of now, Storybook requires Webpack. I think a lot of the Node world is moving that direction.
Can you go from Storybook to like test files pretty easily? Because I mean, it almost seems like you're writing test cases.
Yeah, I was gonna ask
You're
you.
writing UI test cases, and the CDK, the component development kit, comes with enzyme to run tests, right? So if you write Mocha tests, and again, this is giving it a boilerplate test. You're not doing it within Storybook, which I agree would be nice. Like it'd be nice to just have a button here that said run my enzyme tests. You don't. Right now you do enzyme test, which should break because I haven't written my test.
Mhm.
Right, there is a weird print somewhere.
It was line 8.
48.
Yeah, 48.
Mm,
There you
Let's see what's wrong here. Where's it here? Source index line 48. What's wrong?
Ben's complaining about it too. Unexpected token.
There's a cop.
Yeah.
Trailing comma shouldn't tell us piece anymore. Oh,
Because what's class name confirmed?
Yeah, and these quotes are okay.
it shouldn't. That's a variable. Oh, you're right. I can't pass a variable in that way. No, that's right.
You have to write that in square brackets.
Can you do that
Yeah.
here? Like that?
Yeah.
You kidding me? That's awesome. Really?
Is that ES6? Yeah. I think so.
Yeah, it's called computed properties.
What?
Oh, we live in the future.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so awesome. There's so many times where I have to create an object just to pass in a process. All right. All right. So this test runs linting as well as whatever the enzyme lifecycle is, and I can spend the time that I need to get these tests passing, and I probably should. But that's it. It's not integrated into Storybook, but it is into this development kit. I don't know. I feel like I've spent a bit of time describing what I think is cool about this, and I spent a bit of time off in boring React land. I don't know where else we want to go with this discussion, or open it up for questions, or somebody else to present, or what.
So that was kind of a simple component. It looks like that both of those tools are good for simple, kind of dumb components. Are there any gotchas if you were to build a component that was composed of other components that were independently developed, or even integrate with Flux or Redux or anything like that?
Not at all. I said not at all. It is an issue insofar as requiring anything that lives outside that component that you cannot pass in via props. So all the Reduxy stuff, I have not been able to get working right if it relies on, for example, something up the chain that I can't pass in as a component prop. That's probably something that they'll get to when you add the stories. You might be able to allow you to add in contextual reference or whatever that would get you back to Redux, but I haven't seen it yet. But for some of the components that I've worked on recently, some of them are actually kind of cool that you can do this on Storybook. We haven't looked at this in a while. Hope it actually works. So this is that same Storybook component rendering Google Map, but Google Map with all sorts of different props that you can pass into it to automatically render polygons, to automatically turn on geolocation within your browser and redirect you to the result of said geolocation. So again, you can get somewhat complex things in there, but you're right. If they rely on anything that's apparent that you can't pass in as a prop, it's painful. Yeah?
Are you using React Google Maps for that?
Yeah,
I just started using that yesterday. Do you like it?
mostly.
Okay.
I like it a lot more than having to wire it in directly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Stuff here that I actually did. All right.
All right, I got to ask.
Yeah.
Binding methods in line. You said don't do that.
Yes.
I'm just going to come out and say it. I do that.
I didn't do that.
Why shouldn't I do that?
No, you should not do that. Because it gives you little warnings on your console if you do it.
What does?
What version?
So you mean like binding them in the like on click?
Yeah.
Equals
Yeah.
whatever thing. What happens is when you do that, every time that component re-renders, it binds and creates a brand new function,
Yeah.
which causes its children to re-render, thinking that if you're using the pure render mixin thingy, causing all the children to unnecessarily re-render.
That's a really good reason.
So yeah, I just discovered that the hard way like a week ago, and it sucked.
I knew that it was bad because of rebound every time, but I didn't know about the children thinking that they had to re-render.
Because when you, because if you're using pure render mixin, your component doesn't re-render unless the props change somehow. And if you're passing in a new bound function every time, it's a brand new function. So
Props
it
change.
says the old function compared to the new function, they're not the same. So the props have changed, re-render me. Which when you have like a really like complicated like React page with like a whole bunch of nested things and lots of rows and stuff, it gets really slow. So you have to go and add the pure render mixin, and then you really need to like fix the function binding stuff.
If you use the right Babel presets, you can use arrow functions as class members, which just binds them when you set them.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I kind of don't like how it looks, but I've done it.
I have HDMI problems, apparently. Aha! Other end of cable. What are those Babel presets? Do you know?
I don't remember. I just know that it was working for me when I was using Babel 5, and then when I switched to Babel 6, it stopped working, so I just stopped doing it. Because I started using stateless components, and I wasn't. All my functions were located outside of my components, so I just stopped caring. If that makes sense.
Right.
And sometimes I bind inline, which I should come up with a better solution. And I don't think the bind operator would fix that, would it? Is it like where you put 2 colons in front of your? I just saw this yesterday.
I've never understood that one yet.
I think it's the same as calling .bind inline, but basically instead of putting .bind this at the end of your function, instead you put 2 colons in front of your function, and it tells it to bind into context.
It looks like C++.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that, but I have not actually used it myself.
Highly experimental.
ES7 too. Fun stuff.
We'll get there.
But that's just like taken out of like C++ and PHP and stuff like that.
Okay, so anybody else want to suggest an alternative to the CDK that I've just described that's better, or the Storybook that's better? Like, I know that there's a few other tools that are out there that allow you to preview and rapidly develop in UI components, and obviously there's several boilerplates for them. Are there any other ones that any React developers have used that they might say this is missing features that I would like to see, or not? Does nobody care? I'm okay with nobody caring. Okay. Well, honestly, I would say that that's it. Want to talk about anything else?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
For like the uninitiated React person,
Yeah.
what are some good resources for just cutting your teeth on React?
Awesome. React is a list of all manner of React tools, including a start setup here of guides and tutorials. I would reference this if you ever need to come out. I mean, there's a ton of stuff out there in the world. Many of the best quality ones are here that I have played with. There's also React for beginners. Let me see if that's in here. React for beginners. It is in here. I use this video library as recommended by some people that I talked to or whatever. and they're relatively quick library geared towards sort of a newer medium class, like someone who has played with JavaScript but doesn't know much about what's going on here with either ES6 or React. It was aimed just below where I would like it to be, so I found myself skipping a bit, but then I would go back and say what the hell is. I don't know, it was pretty good pacing. Aside from that, mostly just sort of web-based tutorials. If you go with Redux, the Redux author has an excellent Redux tutorial on Egghead. Yeah, that's the person who initially made Redux, and that's worth watching, and it's free, just to get you an idea of why you're doing it. You basically write it from scratch here, and why you're doing it, and the whole thing you can be done within a day, so a long day.
I would say with React, like there's the whole ecosystem behind it. There's React and there's Redux and there's Webpack and Babel and all this stuff, and there's like a crap load of stuff to learn. And it's like me working at work with other people like who are like very experienced senior people, like they get overwhelmed by all these because each one of these things is its own huge project. So if you're gonna learn it, like start with just React all by itself and like build a couple little widgets with it first before you learn the other thing. You know, because if you try and like learn all like 18 of these giant things all at once, your head will explode.
That may be part of why I like the CDK so much, because it set up all of that other stuff for you, right? I had to fight with Webpack a little bit to get bootstrapped in so I could play with UI or whatever, but it took care of a lot of decisions and getting things started, so I could just bite my nails on making component A or component B actually work. Again, for small things that I would then use in other projects, but that's a good starting point. Anybody here hate React or think that, like, I guess you do?
I think it's crazy that you're mixing styles and logic and just like even state all in the same file.
Yeah.
I understand like the benefits for it and the application, but as an Ember person, the benefits you're describing of the pack you just showed, like Ember people get all that for free. And to Eric's point, if you were to learn Ember, you don't have to think about your world. They make all those decisions for you, which a lot of developers don't like.
Right.
But coming from the Ember world, you know, if I were to do what you just did, I think like 3 other developers would do it differently, and that's fine. But you know, in the Ember world, like everybody would get there the same way.
Right. And Ember is based on handlebars, right?
Yes.
Is it direct handlebars or is it its own
It's their
implementation? With the
handlebars,
handlebars syntax,
Yes.
right?
So we have template files, we have component files. Components hold the logic, the templates hold the HTML.
Right.
And you kind of keep your world separate.
Right.
But you're also making much bigger applications. You're not making a small component. So you would never make what you just made in Ember.
Right.
You would make a full-blown app.
Right.
Well, if we're really talking about how React programming actually happens, what you tend to have is you have like some people call them like smart components and dumb components. So your parent component, your smart component doesn't actually have any JSX in it usually. It's actually like computing all the logic, getting stuff from your data store, etc., getting what you need for your component. So your dumb component, like what he was writing, can end up just having like properties that it displays, so it does not have logic.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, and I train a lot of Ember developers like for my job, so I fight with people who their company has taken React away from them and are forcing them Ember down their throats, and they fight me on it and for the first couple of days, but then eventually they, you know, most of them see the light and complain less. But it's just, I think it's 2 completely different worlds. Like bring everything yourself versus, hey, we already thought of everything for you and don't try to change it.
It's very similar to the like Rails versus Node land, you know?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Actually, I'm new to React. Basically, in the last month and change. And Meteor is all handlebar. Meteor blazes their code word for it, but their UI layer is all handlebars implementation. It's their layer on top of handlebars, basically.
Yeah, that was a lot more familiar with the
And yeah, it's almost exactly like what I've seen from Ember in that you have an HTML file that gets parsed and rendered into a JavaScript function, but it is itself just HTML. And you're getting, curlies to delineate your variables or function calls as options. But then you create any sort of function calls and set those variables in a JavaScript file tied to the namespace of that template, right? So more along the lines of what you're talking about. This is the world that I'm the most comfortable with. I have been switching to React and am liking it in part because what you end up with, you're right that I'm mixing functionality here with display, right? Like this isn't just a pure display. I'm putting some internal state into this thing, and I'm doing some logic on the properties that are coming on, and maybe I'm going to assign some defaults later, and then I'm pulling in some weird, other NPM package here that, the only thing it's doing for me is deciding which class names to put in place. There's a lot more going on here than just rendering HTML, right? But while I'm using this component from the React application that is using this widget, it becomes just an HTML element in my brain, right? It's a very small footprint, black box. I have what I can pass into it down here as a list of these are the props that I support or prop types that I support. These are my inputs that I can set onto the widget when I use it. At which point the widget does exactly what it's going to do no matter what I tell it to do based on whatever I hand it or based on whatever remote state I decide to connect in with it. But that state is entirely defined. I don't have it up anymore. But in the state thing here that you can get to in the developer tools, and again it becomes self-contained, so much more modularized than before, which is counterintuitive because you're mixing logic with presentation while you're writing the code. But when you're using it, it becomes, in my opinion, much more modularized and isolated because each widget does its own thing and does its own thing without any awareness or interaction with the outside world. And that's the forced hierarchy of parent down, which is annoying to get used to, but it's pretty valuable.
So I think Ember's borrowed that concept because we did a lot of two-way bindings and whatnot, and things would get crazy in terms of how you pass data around. So
yeah, media
now
all over the place.
Yeah, we call it data down, actions up, and so everything's becoming a component borrowed from React.
Yeah.
And so when you handle data that way, like that I'm very familiar with.
Right.
I think it's really just the packing everything along for the ride with it. I guess it's mainly like the developer tools, like what you showed early on in your dependencies. It's like, you chose those, but another developer working at your same company made, for something else. And
absolutely,
it's kind of, it's up to the user.
Right. No, it's definitely very, the common term is JavaScript fatigue or whatever. That's what we're just talking about these days. And that's totally legit. Like it is way too many tools, way too many options in the world. The other reason that I'm liking React more than the UI layers that I'm used to is that it is much more efficient at render time. Like browser re-render times are down significantly over what I was using before because media relies on a tracker to decide when it needs to re-render a template or redo anything. And that tracker may still be the same, but if it passes down to React that some state has changed or some props are changed and it has to decide if it needs to re-render, that's a sort of a separate layer and it doesn't actually re-render the HTML, it re-renders its virtual DOM and then does least required changes to render the UI layer. So there's a separation inside the guts of React that speeds up performance quite a bit at the browser. Not that that's a huge thing, but it's nice. Yeah.
So disclaimer on that, Ember stole that too. And because they have template files, they can do it a little bit faster because we know what parts of the template are going to change. And I guess React's then stealing that back and they're adding it. So I think the cross-pollination is awesome. I think,
Agreed.
you know, Angular 2 has taken the best of Ember and React, and they're trying to build a framework on it.
Yeah.
So it's all good that everybody's moving forward, but yeah, you know, from my standpoint, I need to learn something to build small components because, you know, Ember is big, ambitious applications, as that says. You're not going to build like a simple button with Ember.
Right. Right. Ember, does Ember do WebSockets?
It supports a lot of things that will allow WebSockets. So I guess it just depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I coming from media world, I'm used to like real-time type interface. Like,
so one of the core team members, he works on Orbit.js, and
yeah,
that's a very well supported Ember add-on.
yeah,
So
cool. Have you played with Feathers.js at all, or have you looked at it?
I haven't.
It's basically this trying to be a very small framework that in itself is nothing but stitching together other projects. So it's a wrapper and set of conventions around Express and you know, several other like sort of core projects, as well as a little bit of like scaffolding for you and stuff. But again, trying to be really, really tiny footprint, but opinionated.
Mm-hmm.
But I've only played with it a little bit, but it does seem compelling. I'm still rambling here because everybody's still looking at me. Is there anybody else that wants to bring up anything or ask questions? Because I'll keep rambling. No? All right. In the JavaScript framework world, there's one other after Ember and after Feathers that I wanted to ask if you played with. Oh, I remember. Have you heard about Apollo? It's part of the reason I was having a little bit of a crisis of faith in the media world, as a lot of the media core teams switched off to Apollo. And Apollo itself is Redux plus GraphQL library, and there's already a GraphQL library out there, but this is trying to be easier and simpler. So it's basically Redux, a drop-in replacement for Redux, and everything that you want to interact with any GraphQL server, and a set of tools for writing your own GraphQL servers on top of whatever you have. Anybody not know what GraphQL is?
I do not.
GraphQL is another thing out of Facebook. So obviously all the React people are hype on it. But someone's going to correct me because I'm going to say this wrong. But it's basically, instead of making a RESTful API request, where you give it a bunch of parameters and you get back whatever it's going to give you back, GraphQL is almost a layer on top of that, where you're requesting more explicitly what you want. So it's almost like doing a database query with your API request and getting back a database response with their response, but very explicit to the syntax that you've provided it in. So in theory, you can ask for only the fields that you want to get back, no matter what their API is written as, right? So you can send fewer things over the wire, and in theory, ask for things in a simpler format, and not have to know all of their different endpoints. This is new to me, so I'm in the learning process of this. As I said, coming from media world, I'm used to everything being real time and sort of over the WebSocket, which is fantastic for a lot of use cases, but there are many use cases where it's not so good because it's kind of resource intensive. So having something a little closer to an Ajax type request sounds good to me, but the GraphQL I think might be a good option for that. So anyway, this is something I'm looking at. I wish there was just a simple about page that would give a good graphic of it. Okay, anybody else? I keep saying that.
We keep following the links that you point out.
So it makes GraphQL requests without relay or anything?
That's correct. This would be instead of relay. GraphQL relay. Right. So this is, I did look at relay, but I haven't used it myself. But this one doesn't integrate directly into Redux, right?
I haven't used it either. I don't know. I was asking.
I think that obviously,
I think I saw something somewhere where someone was trying to figure out how to integrate it into Redux. So I think it's still like that's a question.
right. I think that this is more like a rudimentary, like this is how I can make a request. Here's some tooling for it. Whereas this is more like we're going to assume that you're always going to make requests and send it into Redux, and that's your store. And go forward. Cool. Anybody else?
Alan, can you do us a favor and just like your tabs, can you just take those URLs and put them in an email to me or something? I'll put them in the YouTube description, and then if anybody wants to check it out on the JSLU site, I'll put a link up to the YouTube video of this, and then it'll have all the relevant links in there.
Cool.
Can you explain what you're doing right now?
Copying things?
No, you're copying everything.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
This is a clipboard manager, so it keeps a history,
Oh,
like all of my
okay.
clipboard history.
Okay.
Which is kind of awesome, except that when you use Vim and all of your deletes go into your clipboard, it ends up kind of blowing up your clipboard history. But it is a convenient way of gathering a bunch of details, and then I'll just go over to
Very cool.
Send it on. Anything else?
We don't have any online questions. Anybody else have any other questions?
Do React. It's fun.